All right, go ahead.
Hi, Hilary.
Hey, Anne.
Yeah, welcome everybody. This is just a little tidbit about our monthly dialogue in Grace Between Races. Um, we are here to just reflect a little bit and bring a little bit of presence to between both of us to the gathering and to keep everybody abreast of what's going on with us aside from the gathering itself, the biweekly meeting. So, so this is just to talk about what's coming up for us, and to share, where we are in the gathering, and basically maybe reflect a little bit about some of the things that came up for us with the last two speakers.
Yeah, yeah, we hadn't totally planned to do it today, but it feels like a really good way to connect and really grounding. And so I'm appreciating your initiative, Anne, to encourage us to do this. And I'm also feeling a lot of gratitude for the space of the group and those who are showing up and sharing and
Yeah,
really engaging very deeply.
yeah, yeah.
And so, in honor of all of us and of our ancestors, I want to make a moment to thank our ancestors, everyone who is from our personal lineages and the lineages of anyone who has joined us in this process online in the group and or on the gatherings, and all of the guests as well and their ancestors. Thank you. And also thank you to the ancestors of the land, wherever we are, wherever you find ourselves. Where I am, it is the Pecumtuck and the Nipmuc and the Wabanaki, especially the Pecumtuck right here at Mount Toby, where the Pecumtuck Trail is. And yeah, thank you. And also, I want to encourage that we continue to learn more about the Native people where we are living as well, so that we can support their culture. And I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit more about that in our time today. And also to thank our guides and our guardians and everyone who is supporting us in this work of doing racial reconciliation work and whatever reconciliation work that we are doing in our lives to find greater peace in our connections with all beings. All right. So, Anne, how have you been? And how has this month been in our conversations with Lolly B and Jimmy Two Feathers as well? How is that landing in your life and in your being?
Um, with Lolly B, what came up for me personally is a lot of ancestral um, things. Um, in my personal life, to be more precise, is how to connect with my ancestral heritage. And, you know, I would really like to, what came up for me strongly is, and it's been coming up a lot lately, it's the, the, the mother, the feminine aspect, you know. Um, And I want to speak because you mentioned ancestors. You pay homage to our ancestors on the whole, but I really want to zero in and feel strongly that it's important to zero in on my the mothers, the mothers that have sacrificed so much for society but haven't been given the kind of homage and attention that perhaps they deserve. I think it's very important for us, especially at this time, to really pay attention to the cosmic mother
Mm-hmm.
and to really center ourselves and really give show appreciation for the role that the mother have played in all our lives. I mean, we are women, but we came from a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to really pay attention to Black mothers for in this respect because I think it's a kind of invisible, underappreciated role that Black mothers play, and it's coming from me as a person, also as a Black woman, because I didn't really understand a lot of things about growing up, about the role mothers play until I become a mother myself. And for especially as Black mothers, because in a sense, Black mothers had to be go beyond what it takes to be a mother in the traditional form. Black mothers have had to be play role of both mother, male and female, and sometimes she opened from 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 my experience, her heart was really open, is an open space, and she really embraced all children. And I've seen Black women be nannies. I've seen Black women play the role of with their own children as community holders, as the whole container. And I think that's a role that haven't been respected by society as a whole, haven't really looked at that and given the appreciation for that role. And she did that without being compensated most of the time. And there's a cry that's coming out for her to speak up and really be honored for her role in society.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's easy for us to really, go ahead and really enjoy things and look at the bright side of things. But sometimes we really have to look at what's right in front of us, that could make so much. Sometimes it doesn't take much. It really takes just a little effort to pay some attention. And as Jerry was saying in his video, sometimes it's just a matter of, looking somebody in the eye and saying, I've seen you, I've seen what you've done, and I appreciate that, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So it's the little things that we take for granted that we may think that, okay, to solve this, we need, to compensate on a big scale or, like reconciling on a big scale. It's no, sometimes it's just the simple little things that makes us human that we need to do, you know. And those little places are the spaces that makes a whole big difference in our lives, but not only in our lives, in our all the world, as a whole, and set the examples for younger generations to come,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So the mother principle, you know, the role women play is so important. And I don't think I could give any kind of respect in the true sense of deserving to that, but I feel that it's very important for me to say something about that, you know, and give open space for dialogue more on that principle. And the heart space is so important right now for all of us to come back to the feeling space, that it would be like not bringing her in would be like defeating the purpose, in my opinion, you know, because right now we need that heart, whether we talk about Mother Earth, whether we talk about the cosmic mother on the whole of reality, whether we talk about individual mothers, we talk about Black women, their experiences, you know, on the whole, we all need to respect mothers, understand the feminine principle, and give due respect to that. And if we do, I feel like a lot of things would change. I know we live in a society that is very still male dominated, and I'm not talking anti-male here. I'm talking, you know, specifically to the feminine principle and what women and mothers and Mother Earth bring that principle, you know, to the table. And I think that's important to really pay respect to.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if something to that, if something came up.
Mm-hmm.
You,
Blessed be. I totally agree. And you know, I can think about um, the mothers who I know in my life, and of course my own mother, and you're a mother who I spend quite a bit of time with as well, and collaborate with, and I I learned so much from all of you, and I've learned how to take care of myself better because of all of you, and I'm learning what it is to be a mother bit by bit in my life, and I of course won't know what that's like unless to the fullest extent unless I have a child myself, and so I can only be in wonder and in gratitude and awe of what it takes to actually be a mother.
right.
Yeah.
I
And
think it, sorry,
just none of us would be here, right? None of us would be here.
yes.
But I do want to say that we can honor the earth mother any moment, anytime, and build that connection for ourselves as individuals with the Mother Earth, and do the kind of somatic meditation or just presence that we've been doing a little bit on Grace Between Races, just by breathing and feeling and imagining, building that connection energetically and drawing of her resources that she's giving to us freely, and that are energetically infinite and there for all of us. And while her resources, her the resources of her form are finite, we can give and receive as much as we possibly can with her, and to be in that giving and receiving and that honoring with her uh, all the time, if possible, is yeah, it's my intention in my life to continue to build that deep, holding, nourishing, nurturing relationship with her, and release what I don't need anymore and give it to her because she'll take it and it's food for her. Yeah. And that's the work that I do with people, is helping them to feel that and come back over and over again and not forget their embodied relationship with the Earth Mother,
Yeah.
which does not require a personal relationship with their birth mother or other mothers, which is important, and yet some of us aren't able to do that for
Mhm.
whatever reason. Um, and I do believe that if we can cultivate that relationship with the earth individually, then we can really show up for women who are mothers in the world and help support them to do the work of mothering as
Mhm.
well, rather than be expectant of their innate
Mhm.
connection and resources that are all of our birthright too. Some of us just have to cultivate it a lot more intentionally.
Mm. I guess that's where the balance comes in, right? The balance between the male um, aspect and the female, the feminine aspect, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty out of whack for God knows how long. I mean, and um, I think the womb is very sacred space, you know, and there's a lot of stuff because I mean, we're talking about grace between races. We're talking about um, people's experiences with racism.
Mm-hmm.
As mothers, we have a sacred role in this whole thing, and we as mothers are the bearers of of teaching our children the right things, even when it may be dangerous, even when it may be when it may not be so popular to do so. Um, we know if we once we connected to the womb, that's a heart like a heart space, you know. Um, we know as women we bear children, and just like if one person child suffers, it's all of us children that suffers, you know. It should feel that womb connection should feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
um, when we hear of other people's children in, you know, harming themselves or in dire situation, it's all of our children. You know, that womb connection is a oneness. So I would call all women that when we hear of tragedies and violence and we see these traumas work playing out in society, it's not them, it's our children, because these are the children that's gonna inhabit the earth in the future, and we want them to live in peace. We want them to be okay with one another. We want them to be able to, if even if we didn't have that, we didn't experience it, we could instill it in our children. And sometimes we might be in situations where we see that maybe our partner or somebody in the family environment is implanting negative ideas within our children's mind. We need to stand up and save our children, because when we teach our children or allow them to be taught hatred or violence or segregation or all these things, we are destroying our children. And I don't care what color they are. When we teach our children, because when children come into the world and we put them to play, children don't start off being racist. They play together
Mm-hmm.
as one. Racism is taught.
Mm-hmm.
if as mothers we see that whether our other family member or partner or somebody have a negative mindset. And by the way, what I want to also talk about too a little bit is racism is a mental disease.
Mm.
It's not it's not a healthy mind that creates racism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mental disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us haven't recognized it as that, but that's what it is. And once people aren't healed from it, they're going to continue passing it on because we are energetic beings. We project our unhealthy mindset on other people, and then it carries on. But as women and holding the womb space, we bore children into this world, and we could stand up and say, no, this is not okay. I don't want to destroy my children.
Mm-hmm.
By teaching them separateness and by teaching them hatred. Because when we hate, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That's really not okay. It's not like a healthy way to think,
Mm-hmm.
to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's so unconscious a lot of the time, right? So I didn't get the messages from my parents that
Right.
like people of color aren't as good as us or anything like that. I didn't get the messages that Native people weren't worthy of jobs or whatever, or like that immigrants aren't worthy of jobs. They just didn't encourage me to really think.
Mhm.
I mean, they encouraged me to think, of course, and they were doing, um, watching the news, or they were reading books about things like that would talk about this, but they didn't tell me, like, we're going to make a difference. We're going to do something different here. They didn't really teach me very incredibly intentionally and directly. And like they came on Grace Between Races, they value this work. And at the same time, there's a way in which they didn't challenge the systems in which they are a part of, right? So it's not enough to just be like, okay, well, we're nice to people of color, like we don't see them as different, or we honor Native cultures on. Um, it it takes a lot of intentional engagement and effort at this point. And that's the only way that we're really going to break down the systems that are in place and build up new ones. Um, and that can sound really radical, that can sound kind of almost dramatic possibly, or it may challenge people because it's going to force us to change the way that we're living our lives and where we're putting our attention and where we're putting our resources and how that all happens. And I've there's some weird kind of sound in the background, so I'm wondering if that's my headphones. Do you hear it?
Not now. I
No?
heard a little thing before, but yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see. I'm gonna take my headphones out to see if that changes. I think that, oh, it's still there. I think it's just the background. Okay. Anyways, sorry to interrupt, but I definitely feel like once I stepped into making significant changes in my life and not just considering, okay, so where am I going next, with my life, and what do I want? When I surrendered to doing the ancestral work deeply and to being with the land as my mother, and really that takes like laying on the ground and letting go and doing that as a practice and valuing that time over the time that I spend making money, for instance, and over the time that I promote myself in whatever way that is. and I'm not saying that's everyone's path. Like, we have different responsibilities and different needs at different times. And yet doing that surrendering work, allowing and noticing what it really feels like to be held, meant that I could face my parents and I could face the stories of my ancestry without expecting them to make me feel good about myself in any way, because I could feel good because I knew how to source my own connection to nourishment and to support and to wisdom. And then I can show up with Native people, I can show up with people of color, I can show up with anyone, it really doesn't matter, with that wisdom. And it takes each of us doing that work and then finding out where we're called to go from that point. Who knows what that'll be? You know, that might be to build a relationship with the local Native elders and do some reparation work with them, or it might be to go dance down the street. You know, it's like, it's different for everyone. Yeah, and I really appreciate you bringing up the mother, because that's really the source of our sense of belonging. And once we feel that sense of belonging, then we can help others from that place without a neediness or this like push and pull kind of dynamic that we can often feel. And I have felt within kind of activist spaces where I'm like, I don't really feel like I have the resources to give, or like I want to give my heart, but I don't know what that is really. And then the work tends to be motivated from a place of frustration or confusion or obligation, which is a product of white supremacy. I mean, there's so many products of white supremacy.
And it kind of weave its way in different aspect of life, you know, because everything is so connected.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And something else that's coming up too from the whole mother aspect. We know that grounding and the root chakra and, well, the lower chakra is really connected to Mother Earth. So, but a lot of us we haven't even connected because of that disconnection. We don't feel safe and confident that Mother is going to take care of us. There's a disconnect, because when we don't have that connection, we don't feel safe that that Mother Earth would provide for us, would lovingly provide for us. That connection is really important, because that's where our abundance, our creativity, our ability to manifest what we want in this life, in this while we're here. And for a lot of people, we struggle with insecurities about our own livelihood based on a false, created by the society we live in, a false mindset, which is a scarcity mindset, which is, and I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience. So this is really close to my heart, because I am nowhere close of mastering this. So I'm working out my own kinks with this as well as we go along. But I can see it. I can see the insecurities and because of the disconnect with the root, you know, our root, because that root is very, very important.
Yeah, I can relate very deeply to that as well. Yeah. And I'd say life has called me to focus on that root for many years, and to get that really pretty solid. And it's interesting talking about the feminine and the masculine principle, because I feel like once I got that root pretty solid, which has both a feminine and a masculine principle to it, right? Like the root penetrates the earth, and
Mhm.
it requires the earth. So
Right.
we have to do the work of saying, this is what I value, this is what's important to me, and putting our attention into the earth
Right.
and using our consciousness as that penetrative force. And that's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, and then from there, letting ourselves receive and be in that enveloping place and drawing in place,
Right.
receptive place that then activates whatever else is going to come next, right? So I was listening to a webinar by a woman, Annalise. I don't remember her last name, unfortunately, right now, but she has a website called Earthwise, and there's a portion in that website called Woman Wise, and she does a lot of trainings. Have you come across this?
Um, doesn't ring a bell right away, but maybe I have. I can't remember.
Yeah, a mentor friend of mine sent it to my
Oh,
direction last week, and she said, "Watch this." And so I'll put a link on Grace Between.
absolutely. I would love that. Yes.
Yeah, and it doesn't address race directly, but I think that it gives us information around the feminine
The
principles.
feminine principle. Yes.
Yeah, and the fact that when we talk about receiving, we're not talking about passivity and
Yes.
just holding information or taking it in. It's about an activation that leads to action in the world and transformation.
Right.
Um, and that comes from receiving information
Yes.
and letting it change us so that
Yes.
we can change the outer experience.
Right.
And she explains that really beautifully. I think offers a meditation too to practice it.
And another thing that I think is really important to look at with the feminine principle is that we have a false idea of the feminine principle being weak.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think that's correct at all. When I look at the feminine principle, I see it as a very strong polarity. Like it really manifests in strength, a kind of maybe not the traditional form of strength, but there's a very deep kind of strength that goes beyond the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And um, like for the kinds when I look, I have a movie that I'll put on the link that I'll put on Grace Between Races that called Human. And it shows you that the women around the world, um, they show you life on around the world, but I'm specifically looking at women, how they have held things together under really, really absolute, beyond the imagination circumstances. And they still held things together. And it just boggles the mind to know, wow, where did that strength come from?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think that it's important for people to realize that there's deep strength in that, and we're not really talking about being weak and passive at all,
Mm-hmm.
or the idea of being very fragile. She could be very warrioress, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Actually,
Definitely.
so
Yeah. Mama bear energy is nothing.
exactly. So we need to look at that from that perspective too, and know that it's not just that idea of being feminine and pretty and weak and fragile and
Mm-hmm.
just sitting in a corner being whatever people may think that feminine is supposed to be. She needs to be tough. She could be I think feminine for me looks very like adaptable, like she
Yeah,
can transform in whatever she needs to.
totally. Like fluid and flexible.
Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think fire, that energy is like that as well. When you look at water and fire,
Water
they
and fire.
definitely have this incredible adaptive quality to them. And they affect things in very different ways, but they have this profound power. And I was, as you were speaking, I was also thinking about just kind of chaos too, and how there's this sense of chaos in nature that so much of human society in many forms has tried to kind of control, and yet there's really no capacity to fully control it, and yet I think so many of the religions too, and even a lot of the spiritual practices are really about, okay, creating a context in which we can somewhat control our experience so that we can
Good point.
we can be more attuned. We can be maybe it's like more trusting in a way of and so there's a certain I feel like there's a certain balance here, right? So like we have to have enough control in a sense, or stability, in order to create a context and environment in which we can trust and feel secure and safe, and then to trust that when things change and when there's chaos that comes into the mix, that it's not necessarily a bad thing, that it's providing an opportunity for growth, and to always be in that question of like, well, what am I receiving right now? Like, what is the gift of this? If it's an emotion, or if it's a accident, or if it's a person who just shows up, and maybe some feelings of frustration, or whatever it is, that everything is a teacher and everything has information to offer to us, and to be in that place of curiosity and wonder all the time, and how we can identify with this other being, this other experience, and yet to also know what it is that we are experiencing, because I think if we're disassociated and we're not present to it, then we can just get lost in it too. So there's a fine balance there, right?
There is, but like that's why I said let us be spontaneous today. That's
Yeah.
kind of like coming from the feminine aspect a little bit. Because, it's not all the time that we have to have things figure out. Then we don't allow the creative mind, because then we get stuck in the head too much. And for me, that we are a society that's really full of our heads are so full with all this stuff. We need to really let that go, and really come back down to the ground,
Yeah.
and so this is why sometimes I love creativity, and I like being spontaneous and not having to know where I'm going with something all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Because then you learn. In my experience, I learn more when I'm just open to what's coming, right? Like what is in this moment, and
Right,
that's
exactly.
why I have a practice of improvisational dance and music as well. And it's taught me how to be very improvisational in the rest of my life, and
Right.
trust that, right? Yeah. Yeah, and I do want to speak to how I could speak to how both Lolly B and Jimi really live that in their lives. I mean, Lolly B is ready to up and travel almost anywhere to support the people who are in need at the time, and to bring the true story out. And there's an incredible life of devotion and service that she's living, and
Right.
trust in the Mother Earth and her relationship to the Mother Earth, and that she will be cared for wherever it is that she goes. And so she's living that,
Right.
and embodying it fully. And I see Jimi doing that in a lot of ways too. He has a job and doing actually a lot of different things in his life, Um, and I think it's just beautiful how he's taken the loss of his partner and
Mm-hmm.
has found the inspiration to do this next phase of his work around gender reconciliation, and
Right.
that he's bringing himself so completely to that work. And I'm looking forward to having more conversations with him very soon, maybe even today, uh,
Yeah.
after having gone to a day-long gender reconciliation retreat. It was focused on, it was called Healing the Divide Between Men and Women on Sexuality. And so we were focused more on sexuality and the physical experience of the body and sexuality rather than gender, which isn't necessarily associated with sexuality.
Right.
Um, and yet it was very profound. And I feel like I have a lot to share with Jimi and what it is that we're going to be creating, because I let myself fully enter into that container,
Right.
not knowing, and learn the whole time and learn from everyone there.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and we're probably going to postpone, like probably 90% or postpone the gender reconciliation retreat, because I learned so much, and there's so much for us to talk about in order to integrate that into what it is that we're planning to do.
Right.
And I'm feeling also just this deepening that's needed between Jimi and I. And after we had that conversation, it was like, wow, yeah, we've come quite a ways, and there's a lot more for us to talk about. And that became really clear to me, for us to
Right.
do this on the level of integrity and authenticity that I'm needing to bring.
Yeah.
Like it's not a question of, okay, I want to bring this. It's like, no, my body will bring it, and if we aren't aligned, then it will be uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
for me, him, people in the space, possibly because of what I'm working with in this lifetime, and the real deep embodiment work. So I'm excited and grateful for my practices, so that I can feel confident to be in the flow like this with him,
Yeah.
and with you too.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is great.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he brought up some very good points. I mean, his life is a living testament of somebody who, put himself in different circumstances and situations. So there's a lot of wisdom, and I mean that's moving like this, waves. It's not going the straight line.
Yeah. Oh,
And,
absolutely.
and so when you do stuff like that, there's a lot of growth, and there's a lot of wisdom that comes with that kind of experience. So um, and also when regarding the question, and he brought out points of mentorship towards younger men and boys. So that's very important to for me with the masculine. With men, I think there's a great need for men who are healed and have kind of done their own inner work to work with younger boys in order to be their mentors. And on so many different levels that's needed, because there's so many boys who haven't had true um, role good role models to follow, and haven't had fathers, and they grew up with mothers. So there's a very big need for healthy male role models in society.
Yeah.
And with Lolly B, you know, she, the work that she's doing, I mean, she's on the front line, and there again, she's a living example of a person who's being outside there and putting herself in situations where, direct contact with people and their experiences. Now, you can't get any better stories than being in between the people and seeing their experiences. and feeling what they're going through.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. It's not for everybody. The way she's doing it, we are all called in different ways, of course. But I mean, you know, the courage that it takes for her to put herself outside there. I mean, that's so admirable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm grateful for her so that she can offer us some of the wisdom, a taste of the wisdom that she's receiving as well.
Mhm.
And and also just the equanimity that she brings
Yeah,
to showing up and asking these questions and not assuming anything and
yeah,
not saying, okay, this person did this and so they're not good, or right, they're not a good activist or whatever it is.
right,
Really understanding where they're coming from in their story,
right,
and also seeing the complexity in all of this and hearing the native perspective saying, yeah, that offends us, like
yeah,
that doesn't feel good.
yeah,
And also listening to other people saying, well, this is a natural human thing that I'm doing, like picking up
mm,
a feather and putting it in my hair. It's like, it's not a Native American thing or an Indigenous American thing. It's just what humans have done, always done. And so no one owns that. And so who can say what we can or can't do or what's good or bad? Like, it
yeah,
really comes back down to our own conscience. And
right,
we can only develop that conscience by inhabiting our body and building a deep relationship with all of our relations. And the
yeah,
native traditions are teaching that. And so many of us white people who aren't native are wanting to learn those practices, right? Because we want to honor them. And I come back to this over and over again, that it's important to go back to our own ancestry as much as we can, and to communities and to cultures that are welcoming us to that as well.
yeah. But there's a little thing that came up for me when she was speaking is really not a matter of because I think when you look at natives and any Aboriginal cultures, most of these people are open-hearted people. They really want to share what they have. The problem with the appropriateness of culture is the fact that when people come in and take certain things from the culture, and it's more like a materialistic kind of thing to build, to open businesses and use those things to make money, and
Yeah.
then come back at some point and sell it back to the community as their own. You
Yeah.
know, this is the appropriateness we're talking about, and it's not okay because some of these things have to be given. And it's like if you go into any white community or any European community, what they have, they highly protect it. And if somebody is infringing on it, there are laws and rules that are guided by, so that that doesn't happen. So it shouldn't be like it's good, it's okay on one side and it's not okay. It should be around the board. If something is taken, it must be given the respect where it came from, and not be like a money making thing where at some point you don't know where that where that thing comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So the ownership of it looks like it's coming from a different culture, when I mean at the end of the day everything belongs to everybody, to be quite honest. But what we're saying is that there's something that's like that is unique to certain cultures,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to respect that.
Mm-hmm. And honor it,
Honor
and
it.
give back, really give back
Exactly.
to it.
And give back to the communities, because that is what it's almost like we are all gifted with certain things to really help protect our livelihood. It's really how we live. It's how we earn, and then when somebody else come and take it and then sell it back to you, it's almost like, I don't know, there's some kind of a rip-off feeling in that. So
Mhm. And a lot of people aren't aware of it, you know. So, for instance, just from my own experience, like I went to study in India and Nepal, and I was studying Tibetan Buddhism, and I brought my movement practice there, and I met an Indian man who invited me to come to a festival and to teach, and it was called the Tattva Festival, which means element festival. And
Right.
it was at this beautiful retreat center, and I was like, whoa, like, how did this happen? It was my last week in India after 7 months being there, and
Right.
they gave me a full like week hanging out there teaching, and it was weird because here I am, like, I've been meditating for years, you know, and that comes from India originally, right? And then they invited me to come bring it in this embodiment form that I've kind of cultivated from all the things I've learned, and to
Right.
give it to them. They
Mhm.
weren't paying me, but they were having me be there for free, and they were kind of like guruizing me, you know, like they were like all the people who, but mostly young Indians my age, were like watching me, like, and doing everything I was doing. And that's not what happens when I do the workshop here in this country. Like, people go inside and they find their own journey, and it's really about looking for your own guidance and finding that guidance inside. And it was so interesting how they wanted me to show them exactly what to do. And
Mhm.
I had to practice so hard to go inside and be like, no, okay, close our eyes, go inside, like follow your own desires or your own calling. And
But do
and
you think that comes from because in India there's an emphasis on guru, like having a
yeah,
guru?
I think so. And they were kind of putting me on a pedestal because I was white too.
Right.
And
Right.
they weren't aware of it really. I mean, on some level maybe,
Yeah.
but it actually made me feel really uncomfortable. and
Yeah.
and I had some conversations with a few of them about it, but they're like, but you just have like the best of both worlds, they would kind of say to me, you know. You have this white experience and all this great education and opportunities, and then you get to come here and do these things too. And you know, it's true, like I have incredible privilege, and
Yeah.
I need to acknowledge that. And I just kept trying to encourage them to talk about, well, what is it that you're bringing and you're excited about? Like, you live this deeply just because it's in your heritage and your ancestry and your culture, and to honor that and come back to that place of alignment in you. So if I could help provide an opportunity for them to feel that a little bit more, then I would feel like I was actually doing something that was
Yeah.
supportive. It's hard to do that in just like a workshop with people.
Well, of course, of course. But I get where you're coming from because I mean, there's a lack of sometimes appreciation for our own culture. Sometimes, I'm coming from Trinidad, and I could only speak from that perspective. Like, we have the steel drums that we
Mm,
play, and when I was home growing up, I mean, like I grew up with it, but I didn't have the appreciation for it. When I came here, I have more appreciation now here for it than when I was growing up with it. So I could totally see that.
yeah. Well, they're beautiful. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And now people are creating all these different instruments that are inspired by them.
By them, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I have friends who have these, they call them like hand pans
Yes,
kind of
yes.
things, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
Ah, well, I feel like we've shared a lot.
Lots, girl.
Yeah, we're like, yeah, just a half an hour.
Half an hour.
Um,
No, but it's good. That's what being spontaneous is all about, just going with the flow.
yeah, thank you for inspiring this conversation today, Anne. That's really good. Yeah, and we're looking forward to having Mickey Metz join us
Right.
on Monday. And Mickey is a fabulously fun person who has an incredible amount of connections in the solidarity economy community, as well as the collective, collaborative, and cooperative, that's the word, cooperative community, especially worker-owned co-ops, and also within the Drupal community and the kind of web development community that's creating free online software that's not controlled by corporations, and why it's important for those of us who are doing activism work and doing change work to create our own platforms online. And so I'm not really an internet person, and I don't. Anne isn't really either. So we're like
to learn and
learn.
Yes, and see where she's coming from, and get that background information.
Yeah, and just taking a bit of her enthusiasm and inspiration and just wisdom that she has, and coming from a very different perspective as a woman of color who grew up in a white wealthy community too, and how that's influenced her. So yeah, next Monday the 15th, 6 to 8 p.m.
Okay.
And we're going to try on Jitsi. It's been a little tricky for us to work with it, but it's this free online gathering tool, a lot like Zoom, but no one has to pay anything, and we can do everything that Zoom can do. So we're going to try it, and then we'll see how it goes. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Hilary.
Thank you, Anne. Have a great week.
Have a great week.
Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to having you continue to join us as well. Blessed be. Bye.